Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Stitching Tales. I am Johanna Lundström, the author of several sewing books. I also create sewing patterns, YouTube videos, and lots of other helpful content around sewing under the brand name The Last Stitch.
And I am Malena Hjerpe. I am a freelance pattern maker, and I also sell my PDF pattern under the name Hazelhen Patterns.
And today we changed topic just before recording, right, Malena? Because if you have followed now for a while, we have done a trouser sewing series, and don't worry, we're definitely going to follow up that soon, where we're going to talk more about how to sew your waistband, belt loops, hemming, and of course zippers. But Malena, you sent me a link about a week ago or something like that, maybe 2 weeks ago, on a topic that we thought were really interesting as sewing business entrepreneurs. So should you talk a little bit about what that was about and where we started this conversation?
Yeah, it was actually you who introduced me to this pattern designer, Just Patterns. I don't know her name. Do you know?
Delphine, I think. Sorry if I am. I'm gonna.
You introduced her
Delphine,
to me many years ago, and because she has been really transparent about what it's like to have your own sewing business and create PDF patterns. It's been really interesting read. She writes beautiful posts about everything, and recently she has posted 2 blog posts about if you can create your own PDF patterns by using Illustrator, and also 8 myths about sewing or selling PDF patterns or selling sewing patterns. And it's so many great points, topics, discussion in those blog posts. I highly recommend everyone to read those 2 blog posts, because she really goes into depth about it and has so many different angles on it, and also her opinions, personal opinions and experience about it. So we will definitely link to those blog posts. Really interesting reads, and you have read them as well, right?
I read the first post that you mentioned, where we're going to talk about busting some myth about selling PDF sewing patterns is one of her blog posts. And the one you talked about now is, of course, should you use Adobe Illustrator for digital patterns, which I just briefly skimmed now beforehand. But you have read it, and we have lots of things and opinions, I think, to say about both these topics. And if you're a long-time listener to Stitching Tales pods, you know that me and Malena are very transparent about running a sewing business. And I've been so from the start, and I've done several YouTube videos and blog posts about this particular topic. It's high time that I do it again. And how difficult it is, and also how tricky it is to make any substantial income in this business. Not saying that it's impossible, but it's definitely not an overnight success. And what I really, really appreciate about Delphine is her transparency. And for many years, she also did annual posts where she actually listed exactly how many sales she had of each of her sewing patterns, and also how much her profit and revenue and profit was after all the expenses were deducted, and of course her thoughts about running a sewing business. And what's really inspiring about Delphine, that I highly recommend that you go back in her history, is also that she managed to, I would say, move a company that were doing not substantially making any substantial numbers. I mean, some of her patterns, when she started to be transparent about it, was in 2 digits, I think, when it was definitely not hundreds of sewing patterns. Some were less than that, and with a lot of focused effort and clever business decision, she really managed to grow her business substantially. And I think now that she has been able to sell maybe 1,000 copies of some of her sewing patterns. So it's very inspirational read if you are struggling, because she is very transparent about all that process. But what I really, really like about Delphine is that she's so honest and still has a very nuanced and delicate way of approaching it, because it definitely can be a little bit of a sensitive topic, I think, as well, because that's why we're transparent. We don't want to sell you on a dream, right? That is unattainable. I think it's very good to have realistic expectations when you decide to do this. And I know that most of our listeners here will probably never start a sewing pattern company, but maybe you will find this kind of discussion interesting anyways, because it's good to know, I think, a little bit of what goes behind the scenes and the challenges of that. And Malena, what was your thought when you read the busting 8 myth about starting a sewing pattern line? What was your thinking around that?
No, it was like, yes, I agree 100%. I totally agree with this. Yes, absolutely. And now it was a few weeks since I read it, but she brought up so many good points about having a realistic, as you said as well, idea of how the business could actually go. And also this is of course a little bit of a numbers game. It really depends where you start from as well. I mean, when I started my PDF pattern sewing business, I had 0 following. I mean, I started my Instagram account, for example, because of this. So I started really from scratch. So then, of course, it has been a long way for me to, build up a following and finding or making sure that customers find me. And I mean, that's still my biggest issue with my company in that sense. But if you have, for example, been an Instagram or sewing influencer or something, and you already have 200,000 followers on Instagram, I mean, obviously, then you have a great starting point. And if you want to create your own patterns, then I mean, you will have a completely different reach compared to me that had 0 followers from the beginning. So I mean, it really depends also how long have you been in the sewing, not business, but sewing world. How many followers do you have, or do you have a big? It doesn't have to be on Instagram. Are you big on YouTube? So if you have a big platform from the start, I mean, your marketing prospects for the future, I mean, it's completely different. So of course, then you can have a very good overnight success if you are launching a pattern that a lot of your already followers want. Completely different if you're starting from scratch. So it really depends a little bit where you're starting from. How is your platform today?
Yeah. And also, absolutely, and it's also very good to know that it's extremely difficult to build your, for instance, social media following, if you're talking on Instagram, to any substantial number, because the people that are interested in sewing aren't that many to start with. I definitely think you have a leverage in that sense that because the sewing community is quite small, we can see that there are coming new, people into the scene and they can grow substantially. But, the cap is quite low, and not all of your 10,000 or 200,000 followers are going to buy your patterns. They are following you for many, many different reasons. And I think it's also important to know that, and I will be a little bit controversial here, but I think we got to keep it real. And I should also say that this is my background. I work in media myself. And in order to build a really big following, you need to have a few compelling traits. You need to have an attractive packaging, for instance, and that can be interpreted in many different ways, but I think we understand what we're talking about here. Not everyone is going to be compelling enough to build a 200,000 following, because you need to have that X factor, so to speak. And your brand needs to have resonates with a lot of people, and it's not just about pretty pictures, but it definitely play into this as well. I mean, if you go and look into any type of influencer, you're going to see that regardless of regardless of the topic, they have an appealing package, right, Malena? Wouldn't you agree with me? I mean, it plays into it. So building, it's a tricky thing, and you have to have a few things nailed down, I think. So just that, in my opinion, is why Instagram maybe isn't always the best platform to build a large following if you're not able to nail that beautiful package that is tied neatly into a bow that checks a lot of the boxes that makes you an appealing brand. So that's one thing to know. And for me, instance, I would say that I am not a known sewing personality, but I definitely am a somewhat known sewing personality. And just to give you some numbers, for instance, on my Instagram account, I have about 13,000 followers, which I think is definitely nothing to scoff at. I think it's a pretty good, solid number, but it's way too little to reach the kind of audience that I need in order to make a substantial income from Instagram. I think if I had about 100,000 followers or something like that, with an engaged audience that was kind of matching what I'm putting out, then maybe I could leverage Instagram more. But just to give you some perspective, and I think at least some of you that are listening to the podcast would think that I have some brand recognition, but just to give you, even I am way too unknown to make any substantial money from sewing patterns. And it could be the patterns as well, I should say. I don't release that many, but it's not just that.
No, but you also, compared to me, you're huge on Instagram, but Instagram is also not your favorite cup of tea, I would say. I mean, you are YouTube and your blog. Those are your, those are your things.
Absolutely. And definitely, Instagram for me comes and goes in spurts. So for instance, now that I just released a new sewing pattern, the Vida knit pants, I definitely have made more effort on Instagram. But again, as always, my mailing list, for instance, my newsletter, it sells way more sewing patterns than I do on Instagram. So I think that's a good way to understand, that, you do need a following. It's unfortunately, it's not just a product. You can make the best pattern, that resonates really well with the current trend, but unless you're able to package it in the right way that appeals to an audience and reach that audience and connect with ideally people that are slightly bigger, I think, than you, they can help you leverage it, that it's gonna be you're gonna have a long road ahead of you. I think.
Was there any of the myths, I can't say the myths, difficult thing for me to pronounce, but was there anything of those that you specifically resonated with? I think the one that I definitely resonated with the most is that, I should see here, I think, obviously you can easily make a living from sewing patterns, myth number 3. I think Delphine, if you go back and read the numbers, you can definitely get an idea of how little money it's left, even when she is doing, pretty well. I don't think she no longer do an income report, but and we have talked about this before, and I thought it was good for me to be transparent as well, because I've just released a new sewing pattern. The Vida knit pants, they are priced at retail for $15 and it will of course be different depending on the country where you go to, because I have this built-in currency. You know what I mean, and of course VAT will be added and stuff like that. But the retail price is 50%, $15. And so far I've sold standalone, I think I've sold 94 pants, and it was about 3 weeks ago, I think, almost, when I released the pattern. So and then I also sold a few bundles. So I think all in total I've sold about 108 knit pants, or the Vida pants. And that is actually one of my, if you look at the early selling weeks, that's one of my best performing patterns. and the good thing about sewing pattern is that, it builds over time. So even if you don't sell that many in the beginning, it builds, and sometimes year 2 you will sell more than the first year. But just to give you a perspective, then I released, I don't release many sewing patterns, of course, so it was 2 years ago that I last released one. But in total, of course, you can do the math, and that's just for all the fees and
and all the work and things and costs that goes into developing the pattern. But you can do the math, and then you realize, I've made about 1,000, maybe $300 or something like that in total. And that's before taxes, of course. And in Sweden, taxes on profit is around 50%. So, and then hopefully it won't take 2 years, but you can do the math. And there are not many countries, at least here in Western Europe, where basically just $500 or $600 after everything, because it doesn't even pay my rent for 1 month, just to give you a perspective of this. And then I know from people in similar, sometimes you sell even less patterns than that. I mean, 100 sewing patterns is nothing to scoff at. It's a pretty good number, but just to give you a perspective, it's and over time, I think most of my sewing patterns is usually around 300 copies. So again, I could pay the rent for 3 months, and that's about it. So no food on the table with my sewing pattern business, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I really when I started a business, and I was on a lot of those like startup meetings and courses and like how to start a business. One controller or financial advisor, she said during a lecture that calculate backwards, like how much do you need to make a living, like to food, rent, bills, like how much do you need every month? So how much salary do you need then? How much do you need to earn then? How much do you need to sell then? Just to give you an idea, like how much do you need to bring in financial in the company? And that was really like, yeah, that's a good good idea. If you want to make a living, like this is your main source of income, you need to think about how much money do you need to bring into the company each month. And for me, I mean, I quickly realized that, selling pattern, like, no, that's a passion project that I can do when I don't have freelance work. But for me, it is business to business that I make my money of. I sell my services, my pattern knowledge to companies that I help out. That's the only way financially I'm able to make it, and I realized that pretty quickly. So that's my main focus, because when you realized how many patterns do I need to sell every month to come up to that level, I mean, it was a lot. You would have to sell a lot to be able to make that kind of income. Yeah. Many hundreds, maybe in the thousands every single month. Yeah, totally. And as you mentioned in the start of this episode, Malena, then you also need to reach a large platform, and that is going to be a struggle, and get your branding right and a market fit and all these things. So it's just not producing a great product. There are so many other variables that goes into it. So just imagining a number is definitely not going to help. And I think the encouraging part, I would say, is that over time, if you're able to release new sewing patterns somewhat regularly, there is like a build-up effect. So for instance, I could say that this month in October here, where I released the video sewing patterns, I also had a sales surge of my other garment sewing patterns. And I definitely made a conscious effort to produce. I mean, when I took the imagery and everything like that for the content, to also wear the pants with my knit top girly patterns and the AV. But still, I don't think it's just that. It's just that you get more people inside your shop and they discover things because there is a newness and a freshness. So over time, you will probably see like a build-up effect, a leverage of even though you might feel a bit discouraged by the initial sales number, but still
I mean, if you don't have any like massive bestsellers, you're gonna need to have so many sewing patterns in your shop, which brings us to another myth that Delphine from Just Pattern writes about, and that is selling PDF patterns is a passive income. Because we have talked about this in a previous episode, how much it goes into developing a sewing pattern as well. And I think that's also, sometimes there might be an inkling to feel like, how shall I say it is, that it's low barrier of entry to create your own sewing patterns. You know, if you have maybe taken a pattern making course and you do your own patterns and, you know, you like to sew, then, you know, there might be, you might maybe been sent the messages that it's pretty easy to start a sewing pattern line, and we definitely have seen some companies that started this way. They maybe started a sewing blog back in the days when that was a thing, and then they released their own sewing pattern, and because they already had a nice chunk of audience and good market fit, they managed to leverage that and turn it into successful sewing business. But I definitely still argue that it's not a passive income, Malena, right?
No, I mean, no. It's so much. I mean, yeah, once the work is done and the product is out there, sure, you maybe don't need to update that product anymore. But I mean, then marketing starts. Then you need to do all that work and customer service and those kind of things as well. So no, there's no passive income to it. I think that's the wrong way to view it. It can be how do you say, I've lost the word for it now, but yeah, when you have something scalable, it's easy scalable, since you don't have to put in so much effort for each and every sale. You don't have to produce anything when you sell it, or package, send it, if you just have PDFs. So in that sense, it's very scalable, but not passive. I mean, you need to work a lot to be able to make it sell, basically.
Yeah. Absolutely, and you need to keep working on it, and which Delphine also points out in the post, you need to churn out new sewing patterns to ride that wave of attention that you are getting. Because if you put the foot off the gas for a bit, like I am a good example of this, that I, due to having a lot of other focuses in my business and of course in my life, I don't release sewing patterns regularly. Sometimes there's a 2-year period between again, so you have to like go on from the next pattern to the next pattern, and then you risk also getting a burnout, because it's a really stressful thing to deal with, you know, all the pressures. Yeah, and another thing which I don't know. Yeah, I think also the myth number 5 here, the barrier to entry is low, which we talked a little bit before recording, that Delphine makes the argument that, you know, you have to have so many things now to release the sewing patterns. You know, the content has to be beautiful, the sizing needs to be inclusive, you have to really great instructions, and, you know, you have to have marketing savviness and you know, maybe licenses to programs and everything like that. So it's not cheap, I would say, to start a sewing pattern. That's right, Malena?
No, and it really depends, like, again, where you start from. I mean, for me, when I started, I had the pattern making program already. I had all the different other computer programs because I needed them in my freelance work. So for me, then it was like, well, then I can do this as well. But I would never buy these programs just because of the PDF patterns. So no, and I mean, it really also depends on what can you do, or do you need to get help? If you know everything, then sure, then it might be really not so expensive, but then it takes a long time instead. But for example, if you need help with grading, or if you want to, if you have the pattern on paper and you want it digitized and you need to get help there, I mean, all those things cost as well. And the myth that I really liked was the second one, that you don't need a lot of sewing experiences to release a good pattern. Here again, no, you don't maybe need it if you get the help. If you have professionals that are helping you with certain things, then sure, because you buy the expertise instead. But if you want to do everything yourself, I mean, your level of skills, it needs to be quite advanced. Like you need to have your experiences, or the things that you do are going to be very limited. What you can do, and she wrote it so beautiful. You just don't know what you don't know, and this is really this is why I want to educate myself as a tailor as well. Not because I want to be a tailor, but I just want to know exactly everything, how you do, and I want to have the practical experience myself, how to do beautiful tailored trousers or blazers or whatever. I just don't know what I don't know.
Yeah. You definitely, and you open so many new doors because, you discover things that you didn't even realize was possible. And as we talk about, it's one of the beautiful things about sewing, you never fully learn. And I also, because when it comes to sewing patterns, it's a lot of the skills that we have talked about now is completely unrelated to your sewing skills. So you can basically be the best tailor in the world, but you might still not be suited or equipped with your own skills to create sewing patterns, which I think is a very important thing. And we talked about this a little bit before we started recording as well, that there's also, I think, a myth that is being sold somewhat in old do-it-yourself communities, is that you can do it all yourself. And I would definitely argue that you can't, and you probably shouldn't either. And especially if you want to run a successful sewing brand where you put your skills where they're best suited, I don't think that, which also brings to the fact that it requires some cash flow and to make it happen. So Malena, what are the things that you have outsourced when you have created your sewing patterns?
I have outsourced taking pictures of the final product. I have a friend of mine here. I sew samples to her, give them to her, and she takes all the pictures because it would just take so much time for me to make beautiful pictures, and I don't think I would I would never be able to take that nice pictures. So she has been helping me a lot with that. And I also have taken help from you with the sewing instructions to actually write just write them, and then I'll do the illustrations and do all the layout for the sewing booklet. But to actually me and words, explaining how to do things is not my strong not my strong side. So there is perfect. Johanna, the journalist, she swoops in and helps me out there. Because it would just take so long, and it does, take so long time for me to put everything together. But those two components are I perfectly happy with delegating those tasks and ask for help instead.
And I think also, correct me if I'm wrong, but when you created your sewing instructions, like the template for that, didn't you also enlist the help of a graphic designer as well?
Good point. Yeah, I totally forgot that. When I made my first patterns, I also had help from a graphic designer who did a general layout for the first one, and then I used those templates. I developed it a bit, changed a few things, but I definitely took help with that as well, just to get the general. And that's also something that I know I should be doing. It's next on my, if I want to develop my business, that I should get somebody to help creating my website in a beautiful way, and my basically graphic language, or how do you say, layout, but right now I don't feel like spending so much money on it.
Yeah, and you also, I mean, for a lot of times it can also be helpful to have a graphic designer like design your logo, settle on fonts and coloring and all that stuff, because it's very easy also to, if you think about it doing yourself, it's also very easy to deviate from it, because you get this feeling, all right, I want to change that color a little bit and I want to have these. And while it's definitely a good idea to give your branding some new colors or new identity, I think it's also very good to stick to a certain type of logo, a certain type of typography, at least for a bit, to give your branding an identity and a recognizability, which again is difficult to do yourself. And I mean, obviously, if you had this idea that you want to do everything yourself, you should also be a great pattern constructor, a skilled grader, a wonderful graphic designer, a very talented photographer, really good at sewing so that your photo samples are looking really nice and pristine. As Malena says, you need to be good with making technical descriptions and instructions, and of course you have to be skilled in either photography for the tutorials or for making technical illustrations. So I think that's also a really good idea to understand, and I will make that argument that the expectations has risen, and they should rightfully do so. So I think today, if you want to launch a sewing pattern, it's definitely good to have a polished product with lots of different print options. We have talked about projector files. That's something that we have finally both been able to start offering as well. So it's a lot of different things that goes into this that I think it's very important. And I too use help, primarily you, Malena. So I should also say that, and that's also really good to know that I do not draft my own patterns. I come up with a design, the measurements, the proportions, and all that kind of stuff for a base size. And then Malena is actually doing all the work, both when it comes to drafting the patterns and doing the grading. So for me, that was a really good decision. And for my accessories patterns, I do it myself, and I actually do all that in Illustrator because they're very simple patterns. But I don't recommend it. And I think we're going to talk a little bit more about why we're not massive fans of using Illustrator for the entire process. But that has been very, very good because you do it so quick and so correct because you have decades of experience. It would be a folly of mine to think that even though I have lots of sewing experience and have taken pattern making courses, that I in any way or form should be able to match or top Malena's skills. That's extremely grandiose self-image that I am definitely not taking on myself. So I think it's good to know where your skill set lies, and as Malena says, outsource the other stuff because you want to offer the best possible product, and then you need to enlist the best professional help or best help that you can afford, at least I think, in order to do that. And then you can focus on where your skills lies. For me, I have no problems with writing instruction. I love it. I also do all the technical illustrations myself. I have help with photographer, but I still model most of the stuff myself. And I also do the design because that I really like. And of course I format everything, for the patterns for the PDF. I do it myself as well. And also my branding is done by a professional graphic designer. I've definitely tweaked, just like you say, Malena, but I didn't do that myself. So everything like that is I have like this template for everything that I've created, and colors and typography and all that stuff, logo, all those things. That's something that I've not done myself. Maybe I forgot something. Yeah, I do. I actually do my own website, but also because I have skills in web design as well. So that I do. But yeah, as you can see, even though we are clearly doing a lot of ourselves, even us, and at our level, we still enlist help because we wouldn't be able to put out anything really, really good if we didn't ask for for other talents to assist us.
Yeah, and it wouldn't be fun to work with it either if you had to do something like this is I really dreading this task. Then it's just going to take so much energy and time for me to do it. Then it's just so much better to hire an expert on that specific
Exactly.
thing. So I mean, don't be afraid to ask for to help and hire help on certain areas. Like, no problem with that. And as you said, like the entry level of the expectations now on the patterns, they are really high, which is good, because then I mean, the more products are out there on the market, the more competitive it is going to be, and the more important for you it is then to have like a really good pattern basically, and good instructions, and everything that needs to be included, like fabric consumptions calculations and those kind of things. So it's really, the bar is set very, very high, and that's also something that I really want to, like in my sewing instructions, I always try to explain why you do certain things, and always give like, I mean, we both give a lot of tips and tricks on how to do it, and that's something that I got a lot of positive feedback from customers that oh yeah, I saw this t-shirt. I mean, it's just a regular t-shirt, but I learned quite a few new tricks and tips on how to elevate my sewing skills, and that's really like, so happy that you were able to learn something new, even though it's just a basic t-shirt pattern. So that's also something that really gives me joy, that I was able to, something that has been working real well for me and my sewing skills, I've been able to share that with someone else. So it's really, find your joys as well, and make sure to put that in your product as well.
Yeah, very, 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 very good. That's such a good, because that also builds trust, right? It builds authority, and that means that, you know, you get an extra value when you get, that's a really, really good tip. I mean, because that can be a relationship building, I think, as well. That you know that if I get one of Malena's sewing pattern, I will not just get a sewing pattern. I will actually elevate my sewing skills that I can bring onto lots of other projects in the future. That's a really, really good tip. I think everyone listening should definitely follow that. You know, see where you can offer some extra value depending on where your particular skills are. I mean, maybe you're really good at giving tips, or you know, you understand using video, you can use that to add on video tutorials, or other type of like add-ons that you can offer when you release a new sewing pattern, because it's a lot of things that, you know, goes into add, you know, that the customer will feel that they get their value worth. And yeah, and
here again, like, this is really like, this is why you need to be experienced in what you are doing. I listen to a lot, I mentioned her before, Amy Porterfield. She is huge in online courses and how you create your own online courses and sell them. And she has said a lot like, oh, you just need to be 10% better than the rest, and then you can sell a course. And he's like, ooh, I agree so much with you on everything, but this particular thing, no, I don't agree with it. You have to, as it was in Just Patterns blog post, you just don't know what you don't know. Like I strongly believe that you have to be quite experienced. You don't have to have, I'm so for being self-taught and how you learn things, like that's completely up to you. If you experiment yourself, or if you're watching YouTube, or if you have gone to school for 4 years, or if you taken courses, read books, whatever, that, like, how you get to your knowledge, like, that's up to you. Like, so many different routes you can take, but you need to be more than 10% above definitely those things that you want to sell your course to.
Yeah, I'm going to be a little bit of a devil's advocate, right? Because Amy Porterfield makes money of selling courses about how to create your own course, right? So for her, it's a good sales pitch to say that you only have to be 10% better, because that means that a lot more people will feel like they are the right targeted for her marketing. I mean, we have to remember those things. You know, we all run our business, and that can definitely affect the kind of marketing and phrasing we use. Because I absolutely agree with you, Malena. I think that's another thing that we are very you know, we feel passionate about, you know, that you have to be professional, and you have to have good skills, and if you don't have them yourself, you need to hire them out, right? So maybe be a little bit skeptical if it's too easy, it's probably not true, right?
Yeah, true. And I mean, you have to have it takes time to get this knowledge as well. I mean, I went to school for 4 years. It was more of it wasn't a pattern making school. It was more design school, where we also learned pattern making. So I learned, I mean, a lot beside pattern making as well. And I started as an assistant and worked assisting a pattern maker for like 1.5 years, maybe, and then I became a pattern maker with like my own responsibilities then and everything, which was pretty quick, to be honest. 1.5 years as an assistant, that's not a long time. And in the beginning of my career, I don't know if it was because I had a really heavy workload, so I worked 12 hours a day. That was a quite regular thing. I didn't have kids back then, obviously. So I could be around the clock at my work because I wanted to do well. You know, a good girl syndrome. You want to perform well. And now when I'm looking back to it, it's like, was it because I wasn't that experienced that I didn't actually know how to do best, how to prioritize? I tried, like, you know, should I do this or that, and tried everything? Or was it actually just my workload? Like, I think it also is a lot based on my experience back then. And now I'm like, ooh, it was so many things that I didn't know.
Yeah.
Like, all right, came out of school fresh, thought you knew everything. And it humbles you to have been working now almost 16 years in the industry. It's like, yeah, no, I have learned so much during these years. And also, it of course depends on what kind of products you work with. I mean, I worked a lot with knitted garments, for example. I mean, both jersey, like cut and sewn, and also like knitted, fully knitted garments. So there, I can call myself an expert. But when it comes to blazers, jackets, I was like, ooh, I mean, if I have a great base pattern, sure, I can do whatever. But to create something from scratch there, no, I'm not your person. Because I don't have that much. I know enough about it to know that I don't know enough about it. So, I mean, you really get your expertise area also within a certain field. So, nothing beats experience, and experience, it takes time to learn.
It takes time. Yeah. So if you are new to this, you're definitely going to have to think about how can you build some type of support system of more knowledge people around you. I think it's paramount. And then, of course, if you don't have the money, maybe you can do some trading of services or bartering, I think it's called. We can see if you can help people. Maybe you could, if you're listing your help of a graphic designer and you don't have the money, maybe you could sew a few garments to that person, or think about other things that you might be able to help. But also remember that sooner or later you need to pay, and to think, as Malena said, with that business course she took, and about the controller, you have to think about how much money do I need to make, and factor in all expenses of running a real business at some point, and then there's no way around it. And so you will save, for instance, rather than spending, because what Malena says, all her long experience, rather than spending 4 months trying to learn how to which we're going to talk about, making grading sewing patterns in Illustrator, which we're not huge fans of. You can instead enlist someone like Malena, and she can do this in a couple of hours because she has 16 years of experience, because she has learned all these things and can do it so quickly. And then you might, being so frustrated and trying to use a program that isn't even designed for pattern making to make it work, and maybe you get so frustrated you end up not releasing your first sewing patterns, and then you could just pay someone to do this in a matter of hours, literally, due to the fact that they have the skills and the equipment. So just keep that in mind, which brings me to the other blog post that you mentioned that I just skimmed through, but which also Delphine writes about Illustrator for creating sewing patterns. And I know, Malena, you have some opinions on that as well.
Yeah, and I mean, here's the like funny things about it. Like, I mean, I create my PDF patterns in Illustrator. Like, that's how I make them look pretty and sellable before I make them into a PDF. But I don't construct the pattern in Illustrator. Then I have like a professional pattern making program to do the actual patterns and to do the grading. There I add all the seam allowance, notches, everything. I try to do everything in that program. Then I export it and open it in Illustrator. So the only thing I do in Illustrator is basically change the lines so they are like in different color, different dashes, so it's easy like to see which sizes are which one. But I don't do anything besides that in Illustrator when it comes to constructions. If I notice anything that is like, oh, I did this wrong, I need to change it, I actually do it in my own program again and export it again to Illustrator, because I don't want to start adjusting the lines in Illustrator, because it's so easy to, it's so easy that mistakes happen in Illustrator, because Illustrator is a great program. I mean, we work a lot with it, both of us.
Love it.
When we do
wonderful program.
Illustrations, hence the name Illustrator. Because it's perfect for that, but it's not a pattern making program. And here I'm so conflicted about this, because I know, for example, a client of mine, I helped her with grading many years ago. She is working in not Illustrator but a very similar program, and she does all her patterns in it, and she's really good at pattern construction, so I have no doubt like she knows what she's doing. But that's the kind of thing, like you really need to be a skilled pattern maker to be able to know everything if you work in that kind of program, because it's not built for pattern making. So it's so easy that mistakes can happen. So yeah, I mean, yeah, you can do it in Illustrator, but I highly not recommend it. And maybe you can do a base size great in Illustrator, and it's pretty air quotes quick to do, but then to get all the other sizes correct, it's just not, the program is not built for it. It doesn't have functions and things you need to be able to check in the pattern program. And just to give comparison, like for example, if you do it in Illustrator base size, I mean, then when you make all the other sizes, you would have to basically draw a new base size for each size, basically. Do all the lines, do all the seam allowance lines. Like each specific lines are like actual lines in Illustrator that you need to control. And if you want to move something, then afterwards it's, I mean, my brain's exploding when I like think about how to do certain changes. While in a pattern maker program, then you only work in your base size, you only work on the sewing line, you don't work on the seam allowance line, you just work on the baseline. So it's so easy to be able to see like, are the lines, when you are putting pattern pieces together, are the shoulders aligning nicely, are the armholes, sleeve head, how much ease is there, is it, and then you grade those lines, you grade those points, so it's actually still, it's the same line you are always working with, even though you can have 15 different sizes. That line could be graded into different sizes. So if you change the baseline in one size, then, I mean, obviously all the grading is going to follow as well. So it's just so much more convenient. And then when you add on the seam allowance, I mean, that's so quickly done in this program as well. And you can have really like play around with, change the different seam allowances, or if you want to create also like the end, how would I say, in a corner, like how should that angle be on the seam allowance? Should it be like different so it's easy when you're sewing it, like you can change those things, the corners of the seam allowance, you can change those as well so easily in the program. And I mean, you can do this in Illustrator as well. I mean, technically you can do everything, but it's just so much more work. I mean, it's not sustainable. Fine if you do it one pattern or few sizes, then it's okay. But if you want to build a business, like you want to be size inclusive, which I think is a must these days, like with rightfully so, it's just not going to be workable in the long run if you work in Illustrator. I think you are going to come to a point like it just takes so much time, and it's so easy to get it wrong. I don't remember which podcast they were reviewing patterns. I don't know which one now. And they said something like, yeah, the lines matched up, the notches matched up. It was, I don't remember exactly. But it really like struck me like, that's like the bare minimum. Like, that's not oh yeah, the pattern is good, the notches matches. Like, that's like a book having no, like, they have done the spell check on a book. Like, that should be the, no, that's not enough. I mean, yeah, it should be more than that.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely goes to show, speaking about low expectations and everything like that. And, you know, we should always try to aim to not like provide like amateur products, even though, of course, we are, you know, maybe starting a business. I agree with you that.
And I mean, we all are humans. Mistakes can happen. Obviously,
but obviously,
everyone
but still,
can do that.
Yeah, but it's very good. And I think what you're saying here is, of course, that it's much easier to ensure that all the notches are at the right space if you are not doing the basic grading, for instance, for each size in Illustrator. And the reason for that is that when you're in Illustrator, it's so easy that the notches shift a little bit when you're working with different sizes, and we all know that. And even as Malena says, I do it too. We do actual formatting, like the dashes and everything. I also do that in Illustrator, but when you're dealing with maybe 12 or 14 sizes and whatever, which you usually do now these days, it's very easy that, you know, one of the notches might shift a little bit, and imagine then having to do all the grading in Illustrator to start with. It's you risk a lot more errors, just like human hand raise. It's not your skills that is lacking. It's the fact that you're dealing with so many different lines and so many different layers for so many different sizes that the risk of you doing something wrong without even noticing, it just increases, which is also, again, for quality assurance is why it's so good to do it the way Malena describes, because it just creates new problems, I definitely think, and especially with the grading. I mean, you know, I think most companies now that release patterns at least have 12 sizes and probably more, I think. And yeah, you don't want to deal with that. There's always a caveat, like Malena says. Some people, you know, are very skilled, and I also think that if you do like the old school way, that maybe if you do all the pattern construction and the grading and paper and pen, and then you scan it, and then you could also, of course, if you don't have too many sizes, you can definitely like do the formatting in Illustrator, but then you already graded it like manually, and then you just digitize those files. That's a different thing as well. And I also should say for transparency that I also have several accessories patterns. I have mittens, I have knit hats, I have a beret pattern. These I have graded in Illustrator because they are very simple, like 2 to 3 pieces pattern. You don't need to use a pattern program to grade a pair of mittens in 3 or 4 sizes. That's it's very easy. So it all depends. I mean, if you do like, for instance, if you're doing sewing pads for handbags and you offer these in 2 sizes, then of course you can do it from start. But when we're talking about garments, like full garments in many sizes, yeah, I agree with you, Malena, for sure.
Yeah, that's why it's like it's not a yes or no answer to these questions. Like it's so complicated because it really depends on what you're doing, what you want to do in the future, and what the end product is gonna be. And just for example, I mean, to give comparison, how does the notches work in the pattern program? We put on I add a measurement to a line, like from 10 centimeters from this point along the armhole, for example, then there should be a notch, so I add the notch there. Then it's going to be automatically 10 centimeters in all sizes. maybe I want to change that so it grows 1 centimeter on each size. I can just grade that point then, and I can do the same point on both the armhole and the sleeve head, so it's going to be 10 centimeter in the base size, and then it's got to grow 1 centimeter, like the distance 1 centimeter on each size, and then it's just automatically goes along the line. So I don't need to do like the notches are like 5 second
automatic
thing.
Yeah. It's a push of the button basically, and then you have notches on everything. Yeah.
Well,
whereas
when
you
I
have to measure and move for every size.
I don't know how many times I've done, like when I'm working then in Illustrator with my patterns, and I'm doing the lines to look pretty, and I need to rearrange patterns on the artboard just to make it more efficient, and just to be able to move it, and then realize I didn't mark the notches. And because you have different layers, and maybe I have closed them, because on some on the patterns on some files I want to both have the sewing line and or the seam line and the seam allowance, so I have double lines there as well. And I forgot to light up the layers with the sewing lines, so I just marked the seam allowance. It's so frustrating to work in Illustrator, and I don't even construct the pattern in it, but it still like gives me headaches. It's just so no, I can't even imagine drafting an actual pattern there.
So then
all of a sudden you have lots of notches all over the pattern. Yeah. Like, where do these belong? I am like
exactly, and they're so tiny, right? Because you have to see, they're just a couple of millimeters, right? So it's very difficult for the eye. You usually don't discover until when you really like double checking every size, and then you realize that some notches are gone, and you're like, dang, So I think just hearing Malena explaining just this particular step is a pause for thought when if you are considering starting to draft size patterns and grade them in Illustrator, think again. That's probably our best advice, and there are other ways to do it for sure, and that's why the professionals don't use it. And also maybe I know some pattern, like sewing pattern companies, they maybe started doing Illustrator, but then probably just offer a few different sizes, maybe some very simple sizes. They don't require any like intricate grading. But also if you're releasing a pattern with lots of different pieces, like think again for sure. And I don't think, but it was interesting if you're running a sewing business, and please drop us a note either on our Instagram account, Stitching Tales Pod, or our YouTube channel, Stitching Tales Pod, or you can also email us at stitchingtalespod@gmail.com. And if you have other different experience, because we love to keep this like a discussion going. I know there's no right or wrong way, but we definitely also think that we shouldn't sugarcoat things and say, it's very easy, it's a very cheap. You don't need to have any expensive programs to start your own sewing patterns. I think that's probably one of the biggest myths, because you do need to get probably some type of program or hire someone that has access to that program.
Yeah, and you sound like we are very pessimistic now, and maybe not like. I mean, we still do it because we still release patterns,
right?
It,
yeah,
so
I just released one 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I mean, if this is your passion, absolutely try it out. But maybe don't quit your day job right away. Like have it as a side business, and see how it goes. Like you don't need to go 100% to it right away. I mean, having it as a side business and then every sale is a bonus, fantastic. So it's just about setting your expectations right, to not be to think it's gonna be overnight success immediately. Just have realistic expectations, and if you're passionate about it, absolutely go for it. We will be your biggest supporter then.
Absolutely, and that's why we do this episode as well, because talk about also the kind of things that you could actually and don't have to do. I mean, hire help, for instance, or trade services. That's just one way of doing this in a much more long-term friendly way, actually. And I think that's probably one of the biggest, ask for help and see see what you can do, because actually to make this dream happening, you don't have to do everything yourself, you know.
No, and I remember
great,
so clearly when I this is so ironic, like when I realized it, hey, I'm a freelance pattern maker, I freelance work for a living, but it didn't occur to me when I do my own sewing patterns. Again, I listen to Love to Sew podcast, love them. I get all my knowledge from them, of the sewing community. And they interviewed, I don't remember his name, but he said that, yeah, I do, I help out other companies to do the sewing instructions. And it was just like, oh, you can delegate that. Oh my God, you can hire a freelance worker to do that. Amazing. Oh my God, like, no, you don't have to do everything yourself. And ironically, I am a freelancer.
Specializing in...
Yeah, so it's like, right, I should also get help from freelancer, aka Johanna, to help me write the instructions. So no, you don't have to do everything yourself. And it's amazing how yourself, you don't or realize it sometimes even.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so good when you say that, saying you don't know what you don't know, and what Delphine also does. I think that pretty much sums up everything. That I think we all, when we start out, we make the same kind of error in thought, that we think because we are doing it small scale, we have to do everything ourselves. And I honestly think that a lot of traits of successful companies is that they are skilled at delegating, and that the founders are focusing on where their skill set is best applied, and then they figure out ways of having other skilled people to do the stuff that they are lacking, which is where you really, and then you can keep the fun as well. Because if I had to learn one of those professional pattern making programs and understanding grading, I would not be able to really listen, because it would take, as Malena said, it would take all the joy out for me, because then I would have to become a student of pattern making, and I rather, focus more on the things that I already are naturally gifted at, and try to elevate those talents as well. And you do the same thing, Malena. And so and you can also reach out to other people like you and I, Malena. We have lots of collaborations, and I'm sure you will find similar-minded people in the sewing community, where you can actually ask for help and trade services, because that's probably the best way of actually making your dream happen, is to collaborate with someone else in one form or another, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's good to try it yourself and to have a little bit of knowledge about it yourself. That is really great, because then you will be able to tell the person that are helping you, like, this is what I need, this is how I want it done, I need your expertise in this area, but this is how my customers, for example, would want to have this. So if you know a little bit about it, then you can be so much more clear when you order a service from somebody else as well. So in that sense, it's good to have tried everything, and you need to have a little bit of knowledge, but you don't have to do it yourself.
No, yeah. I think that's very, very good final words. I hope that you enjoyed listening to this episode. Very opinionated, and again, all credit should go to Delphine of Just Patterns. She not just creates really beautiful sewing patterns, she also has a very great blog over at Just Patterns. I think it's called Sewing Tidbits, I think, in particular, and we're definitely going to link to her blog post. And if you're any curious, that's probably your best resource to start with, from everything to, as we talked about now, and the realities of the money and everything like that. And I will also do another blog post. So I used to be really transparent about this stuff, but because I've had so many other things going on, I haven't really done like a business blog post in a while. And I've done several YouTube videos about that, but I'm gonna update that as well, and dive more into this as well, because I think it's such a important topic to share. If you're starting a business in any type of field, I think what we are talking about here, I think that goes to any type of business. It doesn't have to be about sewing, understanding finances, asking for help, using your skill sets where they are best served, all these kind of things, market fit, all the kind of stuff. It's crucial for a successful business. And as Malena says, we don't want to discourage you from starting your own sewing business. I mean, I just said that I can hardly pay 1 month rent with any of my sewing patterns. And I still just released another one because it's so fun. And I love it, and I love the process, and I love the design and everything like that. So even though it's not for me the most important financial leg in my business, and I still can see myself releasing many sewing patterns in the future as well, just because of the fun of it. And what's your take on that, Malena? I think you haven't stopped releasing patterns either, or at least you have plans to do more.
No, the list of patterns that I want to release, I mean, it's just growing for every day basically. So yeah, no. Definitely more will come.
Yeah, so stay tuned for that, and we're definitely going to talk more about this in the future. And we hope that you enjoyed this very transparent episode, and we're going to resume talking about sewing patterns in a next episode. So thank you so much for listening. I am Johanna Lundström.
And I am Malena Hjerpe. Bye bye.
Bye bye.